conservative. It's very slow to change. We have had green buildings in Australia now for more than a decade that have set very new benchmarks. The industry's been very loath to adopt those. I know well the people who built the 60L green building in Melbourne, and they were told at every step of the way, no, you can't do that, that won't work, no, you can't do that. And every time they proved it did work and they could do it, it was just a blink, this is the way we do things. I know a developer up at Ballina in northern New South Wales on the coast wanted to put in a new coastal development using state-of-the-art green architecture, and the council refused his application because they thought they would be setting the bar too high, was the phrase that was given that day. So that's a developer wanting to do it and not being allowed to by a council, which, surprise, surprise, had other developers, real estate agents on the council. But they didn't want the market to move in this direction too far. So, and governments have been loath to drive up the cost of, affordable housing is a huge public policy issue. There's a perception that this stuff makes the housing much more expensive. And to a degree it would, but once you achieve economies of scale, and again, if the carbon price starts coming in, then the relativities will change. But it's a very conservative sector.
Talking about desal again, in Oman or somewhere in the Middle East, they've just finished a desal plant that's also used as a public space, and they've incorporated other renewable resources in the process of desalinating rather than using the traditional coal-fired process.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that work in a lot of Australia?
Well, I need to see the exact example. It sounds like an improvement, and certainly, as I understand it, the cost of desal is coming down, and there are some technological improvements in desalination. Nevertheless, at the headline level in Australia, we actually have plenty of fresh water per capita, even in a changed climate, and the energy consumption of desal remains a very significant issue, as does the disposal of saline water. So there seems to be assumption with desal, well, we'll just put it back in the sea. But you're putting a highly saline, hypersaline brine solution back in. You wouldn't want that to be going into seagrass beds and all that sort of stuff. So I can understand why it's being used in the Middle East. That's a much more acute water shortage situation than we're facing in most of Australia.
You were talking earlier about the need for farmers to be more sustainable and at the same time more profitable.
Yeah.
Do you know of any current alternatives that would allow them to do this?
Yeah. Not enough, and that's what I think one of the mistakes we made with things like land care was that for years we just assumed that those viable alternatives were there, and we built the big awareness and commitment into the equation without sufficient attention on whether the alternatives were sufficiently viable. But I'm a director on the Cooperative Research Centre for Future Farm Industries, which is focusing on southern Australia. We're developing a system for the high rainfall, high meaning above 600 millimetres nationally, rainfall grazing country of southern Australia, and the benchmark there is double the profitability with half the recharge, so half the leakage below the root zones. And in some ways it's been fantastic that we've been developing that project in the middle of a terrible drought, because it means the farmers are really interested in the trial and demonstration sites, and they are outperforming what's regarded as district best practice by a factor of up to 4 in some areas in the guts of the drought. So it's actually a really good demonstration. We have another program called Evercrop, which is trying to do the same in cropping systems, getting much more perenniality into cropping systems so they can exploit rainfall whenever it falls. The problem with our traditional annual cropping system based on annual species is that it's only growing for a few months of the year, and when you get summer rains and so on, they just cause problems and aren't being utilised. So yes, there is an active development of radically different funding systems that meet these quite challenging benchmarks. And they store a lot more carbon as well. And I had an article in the Thin Review last week on Wednesday pointing out that soil carbon is 60 or 55% of our terrestrial carbon store, and we need to be cranking up ways of counting soil carbon in our overall greenhouse process.
So they're able to do this now in certain cases?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, yes. It's in early trial stages, but these are systems that are adoptable now. There aren't many extension officers who are capable of going out and helping someone to do it. That's a limiting factor at the moment, and there are very few consultants who are fluent in these systems. But that will happen within the next 2 years.
Question for the second paper?
Sorry to cover my question.
Okay.
Like recently, last this year, we had quite a lot of rain compared to previous years. Would you say that's the drought is like starting to break, or do you think that's just like a one-off year?
We haven't had a lot of rain in aggregate compared to the long-term averages, but we did get a wet late spring, early summer. The National Climate Centre says that we're in the deepest and most intense La Nina phase. La Nina is the other side of El Nino, which is called the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index, which measures sea surface temperature off the coast of Peru compared to on the Western Pacific. And the differential between those is called either La Nina, which leads to wet conditions on the east and southern Australia, and El Nino, which is dry conditions. We are in a La Nina phase, so this is consistent with long-run climate variability in Australia. However, the National Climate Centre now believes that our droughts are hotter and drier and longer and more frequent as a result of the underlying shift in the climate driven by anthropogenic greenhouse gases.
One last question, Mark.
In relation to the regional investment models for NRM, I'm just wondering, in your opinion, how successful they've been. You really touched on it briefly, but would you like to elaborate on how successful they've been?
Yeah. I've done some recent work with all the Victorian catchment management bodies and all the Queensland catchment management bodies and some individual ones from other jurisdictions. And when you visit one that's going really well, you think this is just the greatest. This is such a sensible way to go. And some are doing really well. And then you visit one that's really struggling to employ staff and doesn't have a very good overall strategy and has had a few continuity issues, and you think, oh my God, this is a complete waste of money. And so we've got this great patchiness across the system, and some states support their catchment management bodies and others just see them as a way to get Commonwealth funds. So there's a diversity across the jurisdictions as well. And we need to, the big challenge is to remove some of that patchiness and, analogous to farmers, get the average of the tail up to where the high-performing ones are. But whenever I stand back and think about it, regardless of our long-term objectives for climate, or water, or energy, we are going to need environmentally literate organisations that are capable of operating at a landscape scale to lead the community through a sustained period of environmental change. So I think that conceptually the model is really sound and we need to persist with it and make it work.
Thanks. So I might get Alice to sum up and thank you. Just give you the mic. Just on the way out, there's a couple of reminders. A couple of reminders that the international students, if you want to join me for Tim Tam's Ice Bobo's coffee and tea, that's Thursday morning at 8:30. If you don't know what a blue, a coffee, or a big smoke is, I'll explain on Thursday. So we heard all those terms today. But if there's anything in the course that you want some further information on, come along there. And a reminder, the tutorials this week are upstairs in the Hancock Library. It's on the second up one story, what do they call that? I'm sure that's the first or second story, but you go on one floor, and it's in the corner